He wasn't supposed to be there, not in the bright lights, not on the back pages, and certainly not in the history books. When you ask the men who shared the dirt with him about Mike Piazza, their voices drop an octave. There is a reverence, yes, but there is also a lingering shadow, a sense that even as he became the greatest hitting catcher to ever live, he was still carrying the weight of being the 1,391st pick in the draft. He played like a man with a grudge against the universe. Tonight, we peel back the pinstripes and the orange and blue. We listen to the whispers in the clubhouse, the ones that speak of a man who was as sensitive as he was powerful, a man who never forgot where he started, and a man some players still won't talk about without looking over their shoulder first. The public saw the mustache, the frosted tips, the pizza commercials, and the legendary home run that healed a city after 9/11. They saw the Hollywood star who dated starlets and hit balls into the stratosphere. But the players? They saw the obsession. To his peers, Piazza was a walking paradox. He was the son of a millionaire who worked like a coal miner. He was a defensive liability who became a tactical master of the pitching staff. But beneath the accolades was a deep-seated bitterness. He felt the whispers about how he got there, the Tommy Lasorda connection, a favor draft pick. The tone never changed. Even at the height of his fame, he played with the desperation of a guy on a 10-day contract. He never forgave the 200-plus scouts who passed on him. He never forgave the media that questioned his power. And as we'll see, he certainly never forgot the pitcher who tried to take his head off. In the early 90s, the Dodgers clubhouse was a place of hierarchy, and Mike Piazza was at the bottom of the ocean. Players remember a kid who didn't just hit, he punished the ball. He treated every batting practice session like a heavyweight title fight. Eric Karros, his longtime teammate, saw the fire early.
Mike had a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. He knew everyone thought he was only there because Tommy Lasorda was his godfather. He spent every waking second trying to prove that was a lie.
The secret? He hated the godson narrative. It stripped him of his agency. Every time he crossed the plate, he wasn't just scoring a run. He was erasing a debt. Ask a pitcher from the 90s what it was like to face him. They don't talk about his stance. They talk about the sound. Tom Glavine, the Braves legend who spent years trying to navigate the Piazza minefield, remembers the sheer violence of the contact. There were certain guys where the ball just sounded different off their bat. With Mike, it sounded like a shotgun going off in a small room. You didn't even have to look, you just knew it was gone. But it wasn't just raw strength. It was a scientific obsession with the strike zone. Players noted that Piazza would sit in the dugout, staring at the opposing pitcher, not speaking for 3 innings. He was downloading data. He was a computer built of muscle and spite. You cannot talk about Mike Piazza without talking about Roger Clemens. The 2000 World Series wasn't just a crosstown rivalry, it was a blood feud. When Clemens threw that broken bat barrel toward Piazza, the baseball world stopped breathing. The players on the Yankees bench were just as stunned as the Mets. Jeff Nelson, the Yankees reliever, recalled the electricity. We all thought, is this really happening? It was surreal. Mike was a big, strong guy, and Roger was, well, Roger. But you could see the look in Mike's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was, how dare you? The tone never changed. Piazza later reflected on that moment of restraint, or confusion, in his own words. I didn't know what to do. My brain was saying, is he really throwing a bat at me? It was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced on a ball field. The secret among players? Many felt Piazza should have charged the mound. The fact that he didn't haunted him in the eyes of some old-school veterans, adding another layer to his complex reputation. September 21st, 2001. The first game back in New York. The city was broken. The country was bleeding. Mets were trailing the Braves in the 8th. Then, the swing. A towering 2-run shot into the night sky. Al Leiter, standing in the dugout, felt the stadium literally shake. That home run was more than a lead. It was permission to cheer again. I looked at Mike when he came back into the dugout, and he wasn't celebrating. He looked like he had just finished a prayer. Piazza himself described the weight of that moment. "I'm so happy that I gave the people something to cheer for. I can't imagine what they're going through. I'm just a baseball player, but for a few seconds, we were all together." He never forgave the tragedy, but he allowed himself to be the vessel for the city's recovery. For one night, the bitterness was gone. For years, the whispers followed him. The steroid era shadow. Piazza was never linked to a report, never failed a test, yet the writers kept him out of the Hall of Fame for years. Players from that era were furious on his behalf. Pedro Martinez, never one to mince words, said, "To keep a man like Mike out because of a hunch, it was disrespectful. He was the best hitter I ever saw at that position. Period. He didn't need anything but his eyes and those hands." The tone never changed. Piazza waited. He stayed quiet. He let the bitterness simmer until the day the call finally came. He entered Cooperstown with a Mets cap, but his heart was always that 62nd round pick from Norristown. It wasn't all highlights and home runs. Piazza was often described as moody or distant. He didn't fit the catcher mold, the gregarious, dirt-covered leader. He was an introvert in a loud man's game. He had a famous falling out with the media, specifically in New York. There were rumors, questions about his personal life, and a strange impromptu press conference where he felt forced to defend his character. The players saw a man who felt hunted. "Mike was a sensitive guy," one former teammate said off the record. "He took every headline to heart. He didn't have the thick skin of a Jeter. He felt the stings. He felt the betrayals. He never forgave the reporters who tried to tear down his private life. He retreated into himself, becoming a man who was physically present but emotionally 1,000 miles away." The tension in the clubhouse during those late Mets years was palpable. He was the king, but it was a lonely throne. Think about the sheer impossibility of it. 1,390th. If 1,389 people are told they are better than you, how do you wake up and put on the gear every day? How do you crouch for 9 innings until your knees scream, just for the chance to hit a ball 450 feet? Mike Piazza wasn't just a catcher. He was a walking rebuke to every scout who relies on a stopwatch and a radar gun. He was the triumph of the unwanted, but the cost was a life lived in a defensive posture. He played with a snarl because he thought the world wanted him to fail. He never forgave the doubters, and in a way, he needed them. Without the doubt, there is no Piazza. There is no .308 career average. There are no 427 home runs. The tone never changed. From the dusty fields of the Dominican Winter League to the podium in Cooperstown, he was the guy who wasn't supposed to be there. So when the lights go down at Citi Field and the fans head for the trains, look at the retired number 31 hanging in the rafters. Don't just see the stats. Don't just see the Cooperstown plaque. See the kid who stayed late in the cage until his hands bled because he was terrified of being forgotten. See the man who carried a city's grief on his shoulders when he could barely carry his own. The game moves on. New stars rise. The grass is cut and the chalk is laid. But for a generation of fans and the players who had to stop his line drives with their gloves, the memory of Mike Piazza is a jagged, beautiful thing. A reminder that greatness doesn't always come from the first round. Sometimes it's buried at the very bottom of the pile, waiting for someone to be angry enough to dig it out. This is what baseball really remembers.